Hey everybody, I'm Brian Bauman from Bauman's Farm and Garden, and today we're going to be picking out bare root apple trees. Now when you're planting an apple tree, bigger is not always better. A bigger tree to start with, it makes it really strain on that small root system when we're talking about a bare root tree. So in many cases we want to pick out a smaller one. And also when picking out an apple, it's important to make sure that you have a pollinator nearby in order to make sure you get apples in the summertime. That pollinator doesn't have to be just right next door, it could be within your city block, but it's always important to make sure you have one nearby. Or you can try one of these trees, which actually has 4 different types of apples all grafted onto the same tree. So it's all in one, especially if you only have a small backyard, this is a great option. But on the farm, I have lots of space. So one of my favorite apples, we're going to pick out a Honeycrisp apple tree. So follow me this way and we'll pick out the perfect tree. Okay, we're over at the Honeycrisp section, and now's the time to figure out which is the best one to pick. So like I talked about earlier, biggest is not always better in this case. So I'm gonna look for one that's not too big, it's easier to transplant that way. These are all pretty good size. One of the other things I look for is to make sure that it has branches coming out all the way around. That way we'll end up with a nice symmetrical tree. In addition to that, I always take a look at the trunk. Make sure there's no blemishes, any scarring, because that could lead to disease problems or not growing very well later on. This one looks pretty good, so we're gonna pull it out of the soil here, and we'll take this off and we'll get it planted. All right, I found a spot out in the garden. This is actually my mom's old garden. The house I grew up in is right behind me for us to plant this Honeycrisp apple tree. First step, dig the hole. So when we're figuring out how big of a hole, I put the root ball kind of in the center here. I want to make sure that the edge of the roots are not touching the outside of the hole, because if these roots were up along and pressed either too far up, those roots would grow straight up, or they may even just kind of grow in a circle, which we don't want. We want to make sure those roots are growing straight out and down and into the soil. So we've got plenty of room here. Also, how deep do I dig the hole? We want the ground level of this tree to be right where it was at when it was planted. Too deep, we put it above the graft. Too shallow, we're gonna cut off some of our roots. So we wanna go right up to that ground level, and I wanna make sure the hole is just a little bit deeper. That way we've got some fresh soil on the bottom there that those roots can first start getting into the ground. So we dug the hole. We have all this extra soil here, but there's some stuff we wanna do to the soil before we start planting it. The first off is to make sure we mix in some of this Biotone Starter Plus. Now this contains mycorrhizae that are gonna help those roots get started very quickly. We're gonna end up with a much better tree later on if we do this. There's some great instructions on the back of the bag. For about this size tree, it just takes about 2 cups of this. We're gonna take 2 cups out, mix it into the soil that we're going to use. In addition, our soil here is pretty good, but I always like to add a little bit of our Harvest Supreme Soil Amendment. You wanna add about 1/3 volume of the total volume here. 1/3 of that should be this Harvest Supreme. So we're gonna take out that much, we're gonna mix all of that together, and then we're gonna add it back into the dirt. So let's get started. Alrighty, now that we've got the soil mixed up, we'll put a nice layer kind of down at the bottom so that it's nice and loose. And then we'll add our tree right on top of it. Alrighty, okay, we've got that mixed up soil all around it. Now one of the things that I like to do with the bare root tree is I give it a nice little shake to make sure that that soil gets down all the way around in those roots. You'll notice that the graft is right here, and we're gonna make sure that that soil level, I want it to go up just a little bit more. There we go. We'll stomp it in. One of the things that you always want to make sure whenever you're getting a bare root tree, almost all fruit trees anymore are grafted. So what that means is that the plant that's on the top is very different than the root system you have on the bottom. I always like to get semi-dwarf rootstock. So we're talking about the roots, the plant that's on the bottom. What that means is that the tree's not going to get too big, it's going to be controlled. But if you get too small of a root system, like say a dwarf apple tree, that tree will have to be staked for its whole life. There's just not enough roots down there to keep it from falling over. So semi-dwarf allows the tree to stay not too big, but not small enough that you have to keep it staked the whole time. So this is a semi-dwarf rootstock we have here. We've got it all planted. Now comes the hard part. So I know that some of you may have to look away right now, but just listen to me as I tell you how to do this. It's not always the easiest thing to do, but you always have to really prune these off. At least a third of the plant needs to go away. We just don't have enough roots under there in order to feed the whole plant. So if you have a problem cutting it off, it might be time to bring the neighbor over, but let me show you how we do this. So with apple trees, we talked a little bit earlier about, I want to make sure that there's branches all the way around the outside. We want to take at least a third of the plant away. It's just too much plant here for that root system to maintain it. So we're going to go down. I always look with an apple tree or fruit tree, it's important to make sure that I grab a bud that's facing out. So if I cut this right here, where this grows out now, this bud is going to branch out that way. Rather than a branch, all of my branches, if I were to cut it down here, the branch would go the opposite direction and we'd end up with too many branches on one side of the tree. So this branch is going to go out that way. We'll grab this one right here. That branch will go off the other way. And we'll do the same all the way around. I know it's hard for a lot of you to prune back this much of the plant, but honestly, you have to do this. There's just not enough root system down there to feed it all. So this is going to keep us going throughout the summer, and we'll end up with a much better tree later on. All right, we've got our apple tree planted. I've got it trimmed back. I talked a little bit earlier about how when you have a dwarf rootstock, you're gonna have to stake it for its life of the tree. This is semi-dwarf, so I don't have to stake it for the life of the tree, but this first year or two, it's always a good idea to put in a few stakes just to make sure it gets established. Once it's established, you can take the stakes away. But for right now, we are gonna put 2 stakes in, one on either side of the tree. So this is a wire lock. This is what we sell to help kind of hold up your trees. The things that I like about it is it's very adjustable. So here's a couple pieces. You can see you can just slide them together till you get to a point, turn it, and we've got it locked together. So we're gonna put this on through our fruit tree. Alrighty, we have our fruit tree all staked and ready to go. One of the last things we need to do is a dormant spray. Now this is one of the most important things to remember when growing fruit trees at your home is you really do need to be on top of spraying them. There are plenty of organic options. I'm going to show you one today. But if you don't do this, you end up with fungus problems, you end up with worms in your apples, neither of which either of us want. So let me show you how to take care of that. So this is one of my favorite products. This is citrus fruit and nut orchard spray. So this contains sulfur, which helps with all of the fungus problems, pyrethrins, which is a completely organic option to use for any bug problems that we may have. So when you're looking at, okay, how often do I spray? Peaches, you need to spray right at the end of January. Do it as quickly as you can. If you don't do that, you end up with leaf curl on your peaches and they're basically worthless. So you gotta remember to do that at the end of January, 1st of February, somewhere around in there. Apple trees, other fruit trees, generally end of February, you wanna do a dormant spray that's gonna make sure that any of the fungus problems that may have existed from last fall or through the winter are gone before it starts to bloom. Once your plant does start to bloom, when it's in full bloom, that's when you want to do another application, and then we always say when the petals drop. So right after bloom is finished, the petals are all dropping, you want to spray it again. So there is a couple applications that you need to do, but with this particular one, it's super easy. We are just going to hook this onto the end of the hose, soak the whole tree down, and we're done. So let's get that done. All right, got this guy all tightened up on here. I have a nice valve on the end of my hose. All that I need to do is open that valve. We get a nice stream. We're gonna soak this tree down from all sides, make sure that we get all angles, the tree completely covered, and we're all done. And that's all we needed to do. Well, this tree is all planted, but we have tons more of them at the nursery right now. Now is a great time to come out to the farm. We're here to help you figure out the right tree, to make sure you have the right pollinators, and the right spot for you to put it in your yard. There's lots of options right now at Bauman's Farm and Garden. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube page, watch our Facebook and Instagram. We'll be posting videos throughout the spring and summer that are going to make sure that you end up with a huge bounty of apples come this fall.